Hello everybody. This, as you've probably already seen, is a video about Blasphemous, a bright, colourful and downright dolorous indie game. I was low-key looking forward to this game for a little while. It wasn't the game I had the most hype for, but I was intrigued enough by its premise and theme to keep an eye on it. Ultimately, I had a decent enough time with the game. I got 94% completion and the true ending in the process, and I just wanted to put that out there to diffuse any notions that I'm dismissing the game or that I think it's bad. Despite this video's title, I absolutely don't. Rather, there are a lot of things in Blasphemous that I really like. Its pixel-based art style, while in no way original among indie games, is particularly vibrant and detailed, with each animation especially being silky smooth. Despite the macabre, grim nature of the game's backstory, Blasphemous is incredibly fun just to look at. A special shout out goes to the cutscenes, which reminded me a lot of the art style in games like Another World or Flashback. Blasphemous's boss designs are a particular standout, exhibiting grotesque and imaginative creativity. My personal favourite is Melquiades, who's the exhumed corpse of a priest held aloft and puppeteered by a crowd of loyal followers. When it comes to lore and backstory, the game's world is well defined. It starts by drawing from religious themes of guilt and penance, then adds copious amounts of blood and surreal horror to the mix. Though the minimalistic way in which the story is told draws clear inspiration from Dark Souls, the world itself reminds me more of the manga Berserk. While Dark Souls' world was mired more in sterile, never-ending sadness and despondency, Berserk and Blasphemous take place in hostile, often predatory settings where evil and calamity will hunt you down and tear you apart. And just like in Berserk, the lore is constantly, almost unrelentingly grim. It's not for everyone, but I love it. There's just something so gripping about the way Blasphemous uses its world to twist and torment the people within it. However, even all of this lore and imagination couldn't keep the gameplay itself from feeling samey at best and downright frustrating at worst. To quickly summarise, Blasphemous is a Metroidvania at heart. Now, this isn't inherently a problem. Hollow Knight, another game in the genre, is one of my favourite current generation games. However, Hollow Knight changes up its basic mechanics enough that playing it feels pretty fresh and unique. The game is built around your main character's frenetic and bouncy movement, as well as balancing your soul energy between healing and special moves, which adds an element of risk and reward that isn't really seen in other Metroidvania games. While Hollow Knight still sits comfortably within the genre, there's enough variation in the gameplay to comfortably separate the game from its peers. Unfortunately, Blasphemous's gameplay doesn't have the same kind of unique twist. This isn't to say the game isn't fun exactly, but it doesn't have any unique feel that would set it apart from any imitators. Character-wise, you have your standard medium-range weapon, coupled with various spells that add projectiles and buffs to your moveset. The sword starts with a multi-hitting combo move and can be upgraded with different finishes, a dash attack and a plunging attack. You can also dash forward to evade attacks and keep moving, and much of the way in which you navigate the world is done by your standard platform jumping and elevator taking. The one main mechanic that does feel original is the parry riposte system, but this is underused and pretty binary when it does come into play. Either the parry is completely useless against big bosses that just smash through your guard, or it becomes absolutely integral to taking down certain enemies. Outside of combat, Blasphemous throws some more Dark Souls influence into the mix, with the Prie-Dieu shrines acting as checkpoints in the same way that bonfires do, and every death leaving behind a sort of essence that players need to retrieve. The game's lore and the way its minimalistic story is told is also evocative of the Soulsborne games, but we'll talk more about that later. So, while Blasphemous does provide a few tweaks to the standard formula, it sadly wasn't enough to ease my initial impressions that this was another fairly straightforward 2D platform adventure game. There are just so many games like it out there, and even the intriguing lore isn't quite enough to set Blasphemous apart from the others. We have the Shantae games, the aforementioned Hollow Knight, Axiom Verge, Bloodstained, Guacamelee. There are a lot of these games out there. Chances are that if you ask for modern 2D platformer recommendations, there's going to be a Metroidvania or 2 or 3 in there. Having played so many over the past few years, I'm just kind of feeling fatigued now. But there's a reason why I found Blasphemous specifically quite frustrating. As I mentioned earlier, I found the game's backstory and world immensely fascinating, and loved the sometimes over-the-top grotesque character design. The problem is in the way that the player has to work for it. In most other Metroidvanias, while the gameplay might be significantly open-ended and non-linear, the way that the story is told tends to be quite straightforward. You move through the areas mostly at your own pace, then hit an event and learn the next part of the story. Barring an exception or two, it's fairly uncomplicated in that regard. However, as Blasphemous borrows its storytelling style from Dark Souls, only drip-feeding you information and expecting you to explore in an attempt to piece it together, having cutscenes and story events doesn't really work as well. Sure, you have an NPC who pops up after every major boss fight to feed you a little bit more information, and some bosses have dialogue for context, but that's not the same as being told exactly what's going on and knowing exactly where the story's going. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticising the piecemeal approach to storytelling. It was a really original and compelling way of world building in the Soulsborne games, and it's plotting that uses the medium of a video game to full effect. You couldn't really emulate this style in any other medium. I actually find it really satisfying in Blasphemous as well as those other games to figure out which piece of lore links to which, and then link all the pieces of lore together to uncover the complete backstory of a game. It's sort of like being a video game archaeologist, only without having to play Tomb Raider. The issue with this game is that the exploration and gameplay required to uncover this unique lore is not only plain and uninteresting, but, as I said earlier, frustrating to slog through. There were several teeth-grinding moments when I would get nudged by an enemy to an instant death spike pit while healing, or simply get bounced back and forth and comboed to death due to a lack of invincibility frames. On top of that, the gameplay just isn't that creative and doesn't do anything new, and as a result, exploring can get draining, just like you're going through the motions with it. The world is well crafted, but in order to discover its depths and intricacies, you need to soldier through some fairly unoriginal gameplay to reveal it. And you have to make these often dull trudges through the map to get to crucial bits of story information. If you just follow the game through from the start to the end, you're going to have very little context when it comes to fighting some of the major enemies. The lore explaining the identity and significance of the final boss, for example, is hidden in several power-ups that are off the game's main path and require secret items, exploration, and, worst of all, backtracking to uncover. Blasphemous's problems don't entirely stem from the fact that it's a Metroidvania game, nor because of the Dark Souls elements in it, such as the storytelling and the sometimes unfair difficulty. Rather, it's the combination of all of them that doesn't quite seem to click at the end of the day. While playing the game, I wanted to find out as much as I could about this fascinating world, but I couldn't help but think that it was gated off behind an otherwise dry and kind of mediocre experience. What makes the game so annoying is that so much of it is executed well. It is a genuinely good indie game, and I am glad that I supported it. I just can't help but feel a little disappointed that so much of the actual gameplay feels like familiarly trodden ground, parts that I trudged through in order to get to what was really unique and interesting about the game. Far be it from me to suggest any sort of replacement genre, but Blasphemous feels as though it started as a story and a world first, then had this kind of Metroidvania membrane stretched over it almost as an afterthought. I just hope that future indie Metroidvania titles with the same sort of heavy lore focus and inventiveness in world building try something similarly innovative or entertaining with their gameplay as well. Or maybe it's best to think about whether the Metroidvania genre itself is just too well trodden a path for games like this to keep using. Thanks for watching, everyone. This was my first time making a video like this, and I've learned a lot through doing it. Hopefully I can apply what I've learned to any future videos that I make, and hopefully I can actually stick to a video making schedule. That would be pretty nice, wouldn't it? You can find links to my various active social media stuff in the description of the video, just in case you wanted to hear any more hot takes and bad opinions in real time. Take care now.